All right, we're back on the record with matter of Gregory Martin, 24PR00777, continuation of contested indefinite guardianship proceeding. I have all parties present back before me in court. First, as promised, I wanted to address the issue of the motion filed by Ms. Wilkes, and so I'll give some background. On April 23rd, 2024, Judge Henry signed a limited judgment appointing
Your Honor?
as emergent. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Do you have a question?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, what's your question?
The question is, I wasn't able to review this document until after we breaked.
I see.
So I went and got court motions that I would like to present as exhibits showing that Judge Patrick Henry signed off on an agreement with Mr. Bullock's case, and Mrs. Salivary is trying to bluff the court in my credibility with the attachments that she has attached to this document for you to review. And there's a settlement agreement in place. Once there's a settlement agreement, one cannot come back and say later, okay, I want this or I want that. Judge Henry signed the settlement agreement.
Commissioner, let me back up. I think what I'm hearing from you is you didn't receive the written response from the petitioner until today.
Yes,
you just
sir.
had the opportunity to read it over the lunch hour.
Yes, sir.
And after reading it, you wish to present more information to the court?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, then we're going to take this up at the next hearing, okay? So we're going to defer that ruling until the next hearing.
Thank you, Your Honor.
That will give you time to present whatever it is that you want to present, okay? All right, so that takes us then to just make sure that whatever you want to present, it's sent to them ahead of time.
They have it. I gave it to them
Does
today.
everybody have what Ms. Wilkes is talking about?
She handed me a couple pieces of paper regarding with a different case number on it than the one that was presented to you. So I have some, I don't know if Mr. Rudolph does.
There's two case numbers, Your Honor. One is the one them filing in civil court with the lawsuit. The other one is the probate case number where Judge Henry signed with the settlement agreement and approving this settlement agreement. And then months later, the niece comes.
Okay, so I don't want to get into the details.
Yeah.
What I'm
That's why
hearing
there's
is
two
you got some information late today. You needed some time to digest it. I'm giving you that time. It's your motion.
Thank you, Your Honor.
The Liz Bennings is still in place. It's not going anywhere. And so I'm granting you some more time to be able to put together new information as a result of what you read today. We're going to take that up next time we're in court, okay?
Thank you,
So
Your
anything
Honor.
you want the court to consider, make sure the other side has it before then so that we can move forward on your motion, okay? All right, with that, Mr. Lee, we're ready for your next witness.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Wilson? All right, Mr. Wilson, we're going to get you the earpiece to help out, okay?
It should be working, hopefully.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Wilson, we'll go ahead and have you sworn in here.
Okay.
Please raise your right hand.
Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please be seated. And for the record, please say and spell your first and last name.
It's Earl Jack Wisdom, BARLWISDOM.
Please be seated.
All right, Mr. Willie, your witness.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wisdom, for showing up today. I'm going straight to the Department of Human Services. It's Chapter 411, Division 20, and it's about the NOSA report. Are you familiar with the term NOSA?
Yes, I am.
Okay, in your words, do you know what NOSA means? Can you describe the acronyms?
I didn't catch that.
Can you describe the acronym of NOSA? N-O-S-A.
Notice of substantiated abuse.
Okay. Now, according to this Adult Protective Services Chapter 11, I believe it's the ORS codes, it said that you were supposed to receive a notice of an Adult Protective Service substantiated conclusion. Have you received any notice, a notice of substantiated abuse from the law firm here, Willamette Northwest, or from Adult Protective Services?
No, I haven't.
Have you heard allegations that were alleged that you were allegedly found substantiated for abuse against my father?
Yes.
Have you had any counter information from the agency itself or from Willamette Northwest, that you actually caused these particular abuses towards my father?
No.
Do you think, are you sure you didn't receive from Adult Protective Services or from Willamette Northwest as a person who might have been identified as an alleged perpetrator against my father in a substantiated conclusion? Did you receive by certified mail any certified mail with a return receipt requested to be the last known address of the alleged perpetrator?
No.
Did you give your address to Willamette Northwest or to Adult Protective Services concerning your address and location?
Adult Protective Service, yes.
And was your address listed on the power of attorney that the court received?
Yes, it was.
And you've had conversations with Adult Protective Services within the last 120 days?
I don't think I've talked to her since I showed up at the hospital.
Talk to who?
Megan.
Have you spoken with Willamette Northwest? She's been making alleged to the court that you are you perpetuated crimes or damage to my father, correct?
I have not told.
Have you received any notice from the guardians or conservatorship or from Willamette Northwest law firm, Mrs. Salisbury, who's been saying these statements against you in court?
No.
Do you believe that there is or should be a NOSA report that should have been delivered within I believe 120 days?
According to the guidelines, yes.
Okay.
Your Honor, this isn't quite an objection, but I'd like to understand what rule it is that we're discussing. So I guess my objection would be lack of foundation.
I did give the Chapter 411, Division 20, but to be specific for his question, it would be 411-020-0105, and it's called the Community Abuse Investigations Review and Due. It's a part, page 33. These are the guidelines for who's on the stand right now, he was an alleged perpetrator, and Willamette Northwest has been the only person in this courtroom stating allegations, but has never presented a NOSA report or review when I'm supposed to get one if I reported this. He's a perpetrator, alleged perpetrator.
Hold on, Mr.
Okay.
Wade. This is a question from Mr. Rudolph, which was, he was asking for the cite to the rule that you're discussing. He provided the site. Mr. Rudolph, do you still have a question, or does that answer your question?
Well, what answers my question as to what Mr. Willie is asking about, my objection at this point would be irrelevance, because that particular administrative rule doesn't apply in this situation. There is an administrative rule where 411-020-0030 dealing with the confidentiality of these reports. The specific rule that Mr. Willie is citing is just inapplicable in this situation.
Okay, so before I take it back, I'm going to take it to general relevancy objection, which is what I heard first from you.
Yes.
Is that right, Mr. Rudolph? Okay. Why is this relevant, Mr. Willie?
This is relevant, Your Honor, because the whole case based on the petition to the court, the list pendences, my allegations that I'm waiting to receive, it's been stated by the petitioner, the guardians and conservators, as well as the counsel, that Mr. Wisdom and Mrs. Wilkes were violating. They keep saying that they have been alleged to be violated.
Okay, so let me take that a step further then. I understand that, but Ms. Wilkes, in her original pleadings, was asking to have the power of attorney upheld. The last time we were in court, she retracted that and was no longer requesting the court to uphold her power of attorney to take precedence over any potential professional fiduciary. Correct, Ms. Wilkes? You no longer wanted to be an appointed guardian or a power of attorney, correct? That's what you said last time you were here.
That was correct.
Okay,
And
so
then I found out about the notion.
then you found out about the notion. So are you saying that changes your mind?
It's a possibility.
Well, there's no possibility. I need to know. You can't. You change your argument. I need to understand what your argument is to be able to answer both of these other parties' questions. So your pleading said, as I recall, that the court should uphold your power of attorney, and that should take precedence over the petitioner's request to take over here. Then a few days into the trial, I asked you directly, I think it was the last time we were here.
Yes, sir.
And you said, Judge, I'm no longer requesting that. In fact, what I am now saying is that Mr. Willie should take over. So, what are you asking?
I am asking that Mr. Malik still take over, but
Which means that you're not asking to take over. Is that true?
yes, Your Honor, but there are procedures that wasn't followed. And once again, I'll use the term bluffing the court by the opposing
But
side.
that's a separate issue, is what that I think you're having trouble dissecting.
Maybe.
I think you're trying to prosecute the issue of a report out there that says you did something wrong. And I understand, if I was sitting in your position, I naturally would feel the inclination to want to defend myself. That would be relevant in this proceeding if you were in fact asking to be appointed a guardian and or for me to uphold the power of attorney. But now that you no longer are asking that, in fact you're saying, I think Mr. Willie is the right gentleman, the suitable person to take over, and that entire report about whether you did something or didn't do something is irrelevant, which means whether procedures were followed under the Oregon Administrative Rules or whether they weren't followed, which is what Mr. Willie is asking of this witness, is completely irrelevant to my decision. So, your relevancy objection is sustained because you're no longer asking to be appointed or have the power of attorney take precedence over their request for a professional fiduciary.
Yes,
Any
Your
further
Honor.
questions on that issue? Ms. Wilkes?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Willie? Any further questions on that issue?
Not
All
her
right,
issue.
so the objection is sustained. Questions about whether this report is good, bad, otherwise, or questions about whether they followed the rules or didn't follow the rules, not relevant to this proceeding. Very likely relevant in some other proceeding, in some other courtroom, some other day, because I think this is just the beginning of what's going on in this situation here, but that's not what we're doing today. So I just want to sever that piece out, okay?
That
Mr.
makes
Wade,
sense.
your next question.
Okay, my next question would be, is there anything that, through this court, that is directly related to the issue of the guardianship and conservatorship of my father that was not stated or you were not given a fair chance to talk about that you would like to speak about right now before the court?
Your Honor, I'm going to object on the basis.
Six.
What about the conservatorship of Oregon Advocates LLC that you disagree with?
Oh, they don't know the Greg, and they don't know what he wants, what he likes, nothing about him. They, like I said on the stand before, I doubt seriously if they have seen Greg or even met him.
Okay, and do you think the petitioners and Salisbury have been wasting the court's time about this petition?
Pretty much, yes.
And what about you feel they've been wasting the court's time?
It's a court proceeding. Other than that, it's a waste of time.
Okay. Have you had an opportunity to read the Martin family pledge agreement that was drafted on June 20th, 1993?
Yes,
You've known my father longer than that, correct?
yes.
What did you take from that pledge agreement, promissory note, and your own understanding of my father's way he contracts and does business?
Objection, hearsay.
So I just want to make sure. So you're asking me about a contract?
I'm asking about a pledge agreement that my father signed. That's the basis of the.
Okay, who wrote that agreement?
My father did.
Okay, it's a party opponent, so it's over.
Your Honor, the document's not in evidence. If it were, it states that it was drafted by somebody else. That's what the document says.
Okay, so
I'd like to submit into evidence, Your Honor, this family promissory note, pledge agreement, durable power of attorney, as well as UCC financing statement that was put together by the elder of the family, but it was signed and endorsed by my father in front of all of his elders, his mom, and
so
everything.
what if it was a document written by somebody other than your father, then it's hearsay. Unless you can point to an exception.
I can point to an exception.
Okay, then point me to the exception.
The exception was my father asked my uncle to prepare a document for him and for me to establish the rules and regulations of our agreement so that way it would be efficient and done by law.
Okay, it's
And
not an exception.
Okay.
So
I was finished.
I'll let you make your record.
Okay.
I'm not hearing an exception, but you make your record and
Okay.
go forward. Okay.
This agreement is what was lived by and honored and respected by my father. He lost sight of certain things as years went by, but because of his diligence and me working for him, he signed all of my work that was in exchange for this labor. This is the only document that predates anything that was done in this court concerning any fiduciary and the rules of the business. In other words, these particular documents were in effect before they were interfered with by a third party who came into the court bluffing like my father was under emergency position. He was not. He sat in the same hospital.
Okay, you're getting off track.
Okay.
They've made an objection. You are asking to admit a document. By all accounts, I can see is several pages.
4 documents.
And
Yes.
There's an objection saying that those documents are hearsay, which means, and from what you've told me, those documents were not written by your father.
They were written by my father. He's the one that typed them up. He put them together. My uncle gave him.
Well, I guess the only way I'm going to be able to figure it out is
Well,
go ahead.
it's clear. He wrote it. My father. It says it in there.
Well, it's not clear because I haven't seen it.
Oh,
Mr.
okay. I'm sorry. I thought you'd seen these. Okay.
As I've said multiple times, if you want the court to consider exhibits, just because you may have filed something in the past, or because you may have given them to my clerk at some point, it does not mean they're evidence. I only consider things that are accepted in this hearing during the case.
Gotcha.
So
And
now you're asking to introduce something. Have you shown it to the other side?
yes, they have a copy. They
Ms.
did.
Salisbury, do you have a copy of it?
We've received copies. We certainly have never seen an original.
Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to mark this as OW. What's next?
Okay.
It will be conditionally admitted into evidence. The objections are noted. This is a bench trial. I will not consider anything in there that does not comport with the rules of evidence. Okay?
Okay. And the rules of evidence, we were given promissory notes from this party. Power of attorneys from Don. Power of attorneys from Mr. Wisdom, and power of attorneys accepted into the record for Mrs. Wilkes. I'm just curious, why would there be an objection to the original?
I don't care whether you're curious about the objections. I've ruled on the objection.
Okay.
I'm admitting this,
Gotcha.
subject to the condition that
Okay.
their objection is noted, and I'm not considering anything in there that does not comport with the rules of evidence.
Okay.
Being very clear for the record.
Gotcha.
This is a jury trial. It's a different story.
Uh-huh.
I'm only considering evidence in here that comports with the evidence code.
Okay.
So there may be things in there that I'm going to have to ignore. I don't know because I haven't seen it.
Gotcha.
Okay?
Okay.
But I think that's a more expeditious way to go than to go through it line by line, page by page. Don't you think?
True.
I agree too.
Okay.
That's what we're doing. Go ahead.
Okay. Earl, did you ever visit my father at the VA hospital in April?
Yes.
What day in April were you there?
Don't remember the actual date.
Okay. Okay. And did you receive a summons for a federal complaint for securities fraud?
Yes.
And was your name witnessed on there as a defendant?
Yes.
No other questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Ms. Wilkes, any questions?
I didn't know I was gonna have to cross-examine him. No further questions, Your Honor.
All right. Ms. Salisbury?
You stated that you don't even believe that the professional fiduciaries that have been appointed in this matter have even seen Mr. Murray.
Right.
Why do you believe that?
Maybe because I haven't heard anyone, but about you have gone to see him even.
Have you ever talked to the fiduciaries?
Nope.
So you're believing this without ever actually checking out any of the facts?
Well, I was checking on him, and then I found out I was not going to be power of attorney anymore, so I couldn't go up.
Did someone actually tell you you couldn't visit him?
Not in so many words, no.
So you made an assumption that you couldn't go visit him?
Because I was accused of abusing him,
And you made an assumption that my clients have never seen him?
right?
And you made an assumption that they can't figure out what's important to him?
Nope.
That's not an assumption? You know that for a fact?
I feel that way.
Based upon an assumption?
No, it's the way I feel, not an assumption.
But also not based on facts.
What was that last?
I'm sure we've gotten through it. You were asked a lot of questions about the OAR statutes. Did you ever read them?
Don't have photographic memory, yes, but I read.
So you sat down and found the Oregon Administrative Rules and read the statutes?
Not completely through,
Okay.
but I was reading.
Did you ever contact DHS and ask for substantiation report?
Actually, yesterday,
Yesterday.
and I was told that is confidential. You do not get that.
So DHS did actually give you a reason as to why you didn't have it.
The what?
So DHS did give you a reason as to why you didn't have it.
I tried to get them yesterday. They said it was confidential.
Before making assumptions about whether or not my clients saw Mr. Martin, if you were concerned, wouldn't it have been better to ask them?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
I really didn't think I'd get an honest answer.
But you also didn't try.
No.
More questions, Your Honor?
Mr. Riddle?
No questions, thanks.
Okay, Mr. Woodley, Mr. Witness, so redirect any?
Do you think it's fair, Mr. Wisdom, to be asked about a NOSA report when the judge just told us we couldn't speak about it and she brought it up again, Mrs. Salisbury?
I was wondering about that myself.
No other questions, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Wisdom. Thank you for your time, sir. You're free to go, okay? All right, Mr. Willie, your next witness?
Yes, I'd like to call myself, and I'd ask like what the rules are. Do I get to just start to say?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a little awkward from there. Not necessarily when you're testifying yourself, but it gets a little awkward on cross-examination because people are kind of like looking funny. So honestly, I'm going to give. You can start your testimony there if you want to come up here and give your testimony, and then I'll decide what we're going to do on cross later. So
Okay.
It's up to you. Okay.
Okay. Well, do you mind if I come back from there to grab documents?
Well, I think maybe it makes sense that you're going to want to show me documents that you sit there for your direct exam, and then maybe cross and see what
Okay.
works better, okay?
Okay.
All right, first I need you to stand and take direction from my clerk.
Please raise your right hand. Under the penalty of perjury, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this case shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I swear that the truth is what I will speak.
Thank you. Please be seated. And for the record, please say your first and last name and spell them both.
First name, Rasta, like pasta with an R, R-A-S-T-A. Middle initials K for Khalid. Last name is W-A-L-I-D, Waleed, also formerly known as Gregory J. Martin, Jr.
All right, Mr. Lee, go ahead.
I'd like to first thank the court and everyone here. Everyone had a part to play in the helping of my father in any type of way. And I don't want my testimony or anything else to veer from my thankfulness, because my father was missing to me, dear to me, for a few years. And when I'd come to town to see him, no one knew where he was, and I couldn't see him, and it just frustrated things. So to get a call after talking with Megan Huffman on April 18th, which happened to be my birthday, from you, Mrs. Fuller, stating that my father was known, his whereabouts, it was a very, especially on my birthday, it was a very touching moment to know that my father was okay, to hear the different things that I was not happy with, that I reported, for them to be maybe substantiated. It wasn't a good feeling, especially when you're close to my father like I am. We do talk. I know every part of his business, but not to be able to help my father. And that feeling of being helplessness, it hurt. And that's something sincere from my heart. Thank you. Now, there were other things that came later. Knowing that my father and I have over 35, since I was a child, and I put in my federal complaint things about my father and working with my father. And he became a tough elder man, but he was a wonderful father. I got to work with my dad. I got to go to jobs. And it just felt very powerful to work with my father. And I felt like I was protecting him by finishing the work, getting things done. And those were my weekends and my after school moments when your father has his own business. So I'd rush and get my homework done just so I could ride with my father in his truck and go check on his properties. And I started off mopping floors and doing different things, picking up debris, yard debris. It became my chores, and my father paid me for that. I had what you call, when children have what we call it, I used to get I won't call it the word a pension today, but I used to get money from my father weekly. You know, sometimes it was $25. I mean, I even made it up to $100 one year, around 7 or 8 years old, because I used to do a lot of extra work for my father. But to see my father in a helpless state was something that I'd never seen before. And to know that he was losing his mental capacity, and to watch everyone just pillage him and take things from him, and then declare he was in his right mind. I grew up with my father, and there were things that he'd talk about people for years who sold property for peanuts, $1 million of property, and took $50,000, $200,000, just undersold. And in my father's words, he used the N-word a lot, but not directly from calling someone out of the name or character. He made me look up in the word dictionary, the word nigger was a low-life person. And so I understood where he was coming from. A lot of times he said that, objecting or talking about people of color, black people. And I thought he had a self-hate kind of thing for years, and the kind of attitude when I went to Africa and met the other side of my family, it was kind of conclusive to add roster to my name. And it was kind of out of rebellion a little bit, because there's things I wanted to do with my father at an early age, and he would just say I wasn't ready. You weren't ready, son, and he'd give my job to other people. But if you had the kind of relationship I had with my father growing up, it was a really good relationship, because I got to take care of my father. I used to clean the house, keep things clean, and I lived with my father, especially after the divorce with my mother, Rose. And we had a great relationship, really an excellent relationship. Then, of course, I became a juvenile, wanting to listen with friends and hang out with the wrong people. My father gave me some advice about that, and I didn't listen to him, and I ended up with a felony and wasn't even at the scene, and got convicted by an all-European jury for something I didn't do. But still, my father told me, I told you. stay away from William. He's no good, son. So I had to live with that so far for 35 years. And one thing about my father that I like to talk about today, and I like to say that I'm apology for putting that video 1 minute up. It wasn't to put my father out there. I thought it was really private. I just sent it to my brothers and sisters in Pennsylvania, to his ex-girlfriend, wife, who told Don, and then she got to the GCs, the guardians and conservators, and to their council. And it was then that I realized, when you had said, Your Honor, that, hey, that's your dad, but we can't put him in a position where he's looking like that. You wouldn't want yourself with a picture of you in the hospital just because you spoke to be sitting out there on the internet. So I wanted to go over that intent. It was not that. It was to send him that the dad was talking, but also that he does talk. He can't speak when he wants to speak. And to invoke him, you either have to know him or come from a level where he's understanding you that you're not there to hurt him. Because my father's had to protect and fight and scrape most of all his life. Now, we had some conversations about my sisters came in. And it was really hard to sit up here. I haven't been with my sisters for over 30 years. I mean, I left the house before I was 18. I was emancipated by the state of Oregon, went through a program, Tillamook, Oregon, a boys camp, graduated from there, and I was pretty much on my own. And so I worked with my dad still around that time, but I have other uncles and aunts and things that are more on the spiritual side of things. My father was more of the material side. He's Jewish, really into assets and those types of things. And he only could teach me, like he said, what was real, how to provide food, shelter, and clothing for yourself and for your family. My other family were the one that gave me the spiritual values, the Masonic stuff, the Egyptian mystery system stuff, the things that raised my frequency and consciousness and self-belief in myself. So I always had a relationship with a lot of elders in my family. One was my uncle, Nathan, who was the labor union president. Very, very serious man, left my auntie with a $17,000 a month pension. I'm sure he was the brains behind the agreements that we have as far as the Martin family contracts that me and my father signed. But my father did type those up. He was the one that pushed that agenda, and he was really happy that he could work me for free. I mean, that was him. I get to work this little guy? And my uncle said, yeah, but of course, he in the end gets the assets and the property because this is a family estate plan. And if you two follow this, you two will both be successful and be able to take care of each other in the end. That's really what it was about. It was up to me to write up my invoices for the work that I did for my father. Monthly was started and became annual. And my father was with the program. He knew everything. I worked on all the jobs. I took pictures. I took photographs. And then I would also make my own relationships within the construction industry, which one of my sisters, Alzina, talked about. My father sometimes had a habit of not completing jobs, and he wouldn't tell me which jobs they were. It blew my mind when Commander Poole was here, and she mentioned that my father didn't finish the job for 8 years. I mean, I'm a customer service consultant. I mean, that's way off the hook. My concern was I was wondering why my father never told me about that job. I would have went over there personally and finished that job within a day or two. And so I hear a lot of my friends, my dad would have this 20-day, he was 20 days or 20 minutes. He'd say, I'll be back in 20 minutes. And that 20 minutes could be 2 hours, 2 days, and sometimes even 2 months. So my father was disciplined in, how to take care of himself. He was disciplined in what he told me. He had me uphold all duties and obligations. And so I learned at an early age to follow through was the best thing you could do with anybody on any job or project. So I just want to say that my father is an honorable person. He had things that as a child, as you grow up, that you find about that you might not be happy with, but that's any person. But even now, today, in spite of how he went outside of our agreements and sold property, never contacted me, hid from me. I think more so me not finding my father is that he hid from me. I found in 2018, qualifying him to do his taxes for the agency, which is the Contractors Information Bureau. I had to qualify him. It's just not because he's my father that I get to use the agency resources, but he had to qualify, and one of the qualifications was to report his cash method of counting, was to report his expenses, direct expenses that were involved with the business, like Platt Electric Supply, CHS Electric Supply, all the supply companies. And then when he made cash payments to people, if they were businesses, etc., or if he gave them loans, I would have him, specialize that. If you gave someone a loan, that's a loan. It's a different requirement for that. You can't just count that as an expense, especially if they're not a business. And he was kind of upset with those types of things. And in 2018, I found $45,000, $50,000 that was taken out. It was in his ledgers that he had gave Toya and somebody else some money, but I didn't know their name at the time. I was just concerned, why are you giving $50,000 out? And his statements were, I made promises to people, son, et cetera, and that's just the way it is. Now, our particular promissory note and pledge agreement was really about pledging the property that he already owned. He owned a property that Earl owns, but in the 1993 on Father's Day, it belonged to my grandfather. And so he wanted to sell that property to someone before Earl and my grandmother and his brother, Uncle Nathan, Uncle Ed, and Uncle Milton. They all agreed that he could sell that property. It wouldn't be a part of the pledge agreement with me. And we planned out, wrote out, talked about the details about the pledge agreement, the promissory note that my father and I signed, the pledge agreement that me and my father signed, and the pledge holder was my Uncle Nathan, who would receive the receipts from my invoices, as well as on an annual basis that my father the property was free and clear of any encumbrances or anything like that, and he had no liens. And we worked well together. Uncle Nathan died in 95, a few years after, and we would just talk about it, keeping the rules together, keeping the invoices together. But I trusted my father, and I had no reason not to. He did provide a place for me that was 2511 Northeast 8. That was my home. I was mortgage-free. All the places were paid for. The property, there were no liens that they talk about today. And then I started to advance up the ladder as far as from a laborer, I became a journeyman electrician. I went through Mr. Wilson's program. My father just wasn't in position to put me through the non-union program. Ed was in there. Him and George Christensen, they all made a deal, and I was in the program working for Mr. Ed Wilson. I had him here to last week to be a witness, but it just seemed to be just a little too much for what the court was asking for, to stick kind of specific to these, what we're doing here today. And so I ended up moving to Montana in 2005, and from there I would come down on the summertime and work for my father, but I was always in on the bid part of his projects. Over time, my father forgot about some of the details that goes into, when you're bidding a job, like, he didn't count the closets that need lights or receptacles. He knew the basic stuff. He was exact on the square foot. He pretty much had almost a $10 square foot. I thought that was too high for some consumers, and my dad was just a really good money maker. He really was. But he would set sometimes some obligations, and he couldn't finish it within that time. I'd come down from Montana on a weekly basis, and I'd clean house. I'm an electrical contractor in Montana, and I might get for a service change, I'm only getting $1,500 to $2,000 per service change. We have a different market there. So here, for that same service, here with the work I have to do, my dad was able to collect $5,000 to $10,000. It's the market. It's a bigger market here. And so he'd have a lot of work. I'd come clean up, finish 6 or 7 jobs in that week or 10 days, make him $60,000, $80,000. I'd leave home. He'd give me $1,500 for gas and for whatever it was, knowing that we had a deal. I'd send him the invoices. He recorded in the ledger, and we continued to move forward. And every time I would take my test for electrician in Montana, he had to sign the affidavit for work experience and get it notarized, him and I both. And I was able to take my master's license. I reached that level, did a journeyman first, did my master's. And then I had about maybe 26,000 hours on record from Oregon to, all the Oregon, working in Washington with my father. I had about almost 30,000 hours. And then in 2006, we got more into multi-family units here, which was more time, more money, and the bids were bigger. And he would hire different employees from different people that he knew. I'd come down here and run the crews. I stayed 2 weeks at a time, go back 2 weeks, work on bids, do change orders, everything. We had a perfect thing going. And then in 2019, that's when things changed a little bit. My father came to visit. He was there, but he came out with a girl I've never seen before. And she was kind of aloof, didn't really want to talk, etc. So we met. We had brunch at Fat Boys. He drove to Missoula. He wanted to see a football game, but the girl he was with didn't have time. I realized after the moment she was an alcoholic, and she was always in and out of the bathroom and was just, drunk. Anyway, when he came back, he did drop off the documents, which were in the ledger, and there were some things in there I just don't think he was aware of that he gave me, and it was pretty much showing me what he was giving out money to people. Lots of ladies, different ladies, and I would always question that. And then he told me, well, you need to stay out of my business, son. That's my personal business. And I said, well, I'm in business with you, and I see thousands of dollars, almost hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last 4 years going to these specific women. And of course, after that, he told my sisters to don't tell Junior about what's happening with me. They would kind of tell me a little bit, but never where he was when I would come and consult with him. I never knew he had sold the houses or even the one to Luca at 2511. Part of our agreement, as far as the UCC security agreement, that was a breach of the agreement right there. I had all rights to go in and make changes to it, take him to court, or we sit down and talk about what we wanted to do to fix the problem. And if there's something we could do, if we had to take it to court, we would. But he always went for the position, I know what I'm doing, trust me, son. I didn't sell the property. I'm just going to have him help me work this out. And of course, today we had testimony today that it was more than that. It's just some of it seemed kind of strange to be property sold on the same day when Mrs. Liberty had a week prior to that to go see the property, but on the same day. And then questions that were submitted into evidence were these issues regarding the signatures that do not match my father's signature. There is a Gregory A. Martin. When you're in the record system online, you can type in Martin and first name Gregory, and it will pull up every Gregory Martin. Gregory Martin is not the only, he's the only Gregory J. Martin, but there's another Gregory A. Martin, and I seen his signature looks nothing like my father's. It actually looks like that document that was there. So I've got some questions about a lot of that. Now, when it comes to the guardianship conservatorship, I'm the one that reported in December 13th, 2023, my father's condition. I was serious about that. And I spoke with Megan Hoffman for over an hour and a half. She took my information. We talked about the durable power of attorney that kicks in whenever he became incapacitated. So no, I was not his power of attorney at any time. He got to pick my sister. He got to pick Mrs. Wilkes. He got to pick whoever he wanted. Our agreement was specific that once he became incapacitated, that I was to take, but upon proof of that incapacitation, that my agreement came into effect.
So I want to just make sure I understand what you're saying. Is that what is in
Yes.
WKs and King? What you gave
Yes.
in here?
Yes.
So there are a couple different things in here. So which one are you specifically referring? I just want to make sure
I'm
see it.
referring to the durable power of attorney that gave me the right, once he only, that he became incapacitated to be able to manage his affairs, his financial.
The one that's entitled Martin Family Durable Power of Attorney?
Yes, and it should have 5 signatures from Grandma, everybody that was there on the June 20th, 1993. It was our last Father's Day event because elders passed away. Uncle Milton, Uncle Nathan, who lived in Gladstone, passed away in 95. Uncle Ed lived here in Portland. He passed away, I think, in 96. Then Uncle Milton passed away in 2008, and then Grandma passed away in 2008 when my daughter was born. And after that, my father was really never the same as far as coherence. He was real close to his mother. He was a mama's boy for sure, and with respect to that, she cared about him, and she was the one who tried to get my sisters into one of the sororities so they could kind of acknowledge some of the higher truths and information about the Egyptian mystery system, the daughters of Isis, etc. Now, it wasn't that they refused. She just didn't feel that they were serious enough to take her recommendation to join one of the organizations. And for me, I knew that meant that they wouldn't be privileged to certain information. Like I could never, from my father's level or from the agreement, talk about this agreement to my sisters ever. They never knew about it at all, period. I was just doing the work. It was prescribed that I could not share. It was confidential information. And my father was serious, as you heard about Luca today, about talking about any of his business, especially that. And I think some of it was based off of his pride, but also he was a master builder in the Masonic order, and I just know that there were certain things that, I didn't get to ask him because it was just kind of, wasn't my knowledge to know that, and certain things he shared with me, certain things he didn't until I rose up to certain degrees. But my father was very sincere and very, very private, and I think a lot of that was his ego. And with my sisters, there was never going to be an inheritance. My father, you had to earn it. That's why he never wrote a will. He never wrote any type of agreement other than the one that he was in. And I believe my father, over time, that he just believed that I wasn't keeping up with it, but I kept my obligations with work. And it was really tough that I had to create my own business after that to really be able to get a different income for myself to protect, guide and take care of my children. Fortunately for me, my father paid the child supports that was taken out of my, it was credited out. I received a total, my children's mother received $112,000 over a 20-year period, which is documented in my father's ledgers, as well as deducted from anything that he's owed me. And from my son, Nicholas, we did a DNA test because my father had an affair with Carol. I just knew her. We got together a few times. Being alleged to be pregnant, I used protection, but even sometimes then a woman can get pregnant. So all this time I believed that Nicholas was my father's. My father believed that too. And then Nicholas would stay to me when he ended up going to jail, did 5 years, came out, and wanted to be an electrician. I had some friends here that got him into the union electrical program. He was able to get in, he completed the program. He's a journeyman electrician, electrical contractor in Washington, and he's doing real good. He doesn't speak much to my father because of the issues behind his mother and my father and the alleged affair that we all knew was going on. But we had took a DNA test when I had seen my father in would be May. I was able to get here after April. We did the DNA test. My father knew about this. It was set up in 2019. He just never showed up. Finally, when we got to my father, I talked to him. I said, "Dad, you want to do that DNA test?" And he just looked at me like, "Please, let's get this over."
This is when he was in the hospital?
Yes, he told me, "Dad, yes, son, please." I said, "You sure?" "I got them ready, Pops." And then Nicholas getting Nicholas there was the other hard problem. Getting them two together. Nicholas really didn't care a lot for he loves his grandfather. He's glad that he got the skills. He went to his grandfather about being trained in the apprenticeship program. My dad just ignored him. He felt it wasn't, and it really wasn't my dad's position to really help him. It was me. I was already the master electrician. I have connections here with the union and with a pastor by the name of Eric Garcia, who filled out an application and got Nicholas into the IBW electrical union program. He went in there and he kicked butt. He earned his way. He got his license. It was tough for him too, but he got his license, but he could never count on my father. And so when it comes to issues like seeing my father in the hospital, etc., and same with my daughter, they never really took their own initiative, even though I would say that's your grandpa regardless. But my father pretty much disregarded those two of my children who lived here. He didn't want to see them. He didn't really want them a part of his life. My father wanted to be personal, but I think he was suffering. As I mentioned in one of my petitions, he was suffering under alcohol and drug abuse. His drug was more like the speed type stuff, I had to take care of my father for a few years where no one really knew this, and he had my total confidence. Then I ain't gonna tell everybody your business, not like that, because what you have, I think, came from the Vietnam War. I think he was suffering from that Ancient Orange. Is it Ancient Orange or something, that orange, whatever that is? The Oregon advocates talked to me about that, and I believe that was an issue, but he suffered. My father suffered from nightmares from Vietnam. I don't know what happened in that war, but the effects of that, he didn't do counseling. He did for a while, but he just didn't stick to anything he didn't want to do, and that was my father. Just something that I think we all learned a little bit from my sisters and from the record. And he had a problem with trust with everybody. That's just how my father was. And after I stopped looking for his approval as a young man in life, I had two uncles who, when you're young, you're looking for approval, acceptance, for your elders to accept you. I stopped worrying about that stuff. I started trying to live my best life with me. So I stopped worrying about my father's approval. But when I mastered up and became the master electrician and worked with my father, we get on jobs, he'd see me blow through all the stuff. Because I didn't have the phone, I didn't have all this time, and I was more experienced than what he really thought. And he would compliment me and says, son, I can't even say nothing about you. I'm sorry all the years I've talked SHIT to you about this and that. I just want the best training for you. And I believe he meant that. I believe my father was on me a lot because he just wanted the best for me. And he was, sometimes as parents, we try to parent the way we were parented, and it doesn't always make sense. Because the way my father parented with me, I tried that with my children and it didn't work. I had to go to counseling for 3 years. It was actually even court ordered. So that way I could communicate with, especially with my daughter, so that way we were on the same page. You learn to let children make their own decisions versus imposing what they need to do before they do it. And that's something that's helped me out not only in counseling, but with my relationships with people over the last 15 years. So I've got a 16-year-old, and she's more like my grandmother. My father, she's really she takes chemistry. She's the youngest tax professional on the planet. In 2000, when she was 10 years old, she passed 2 of the IRS exams in order to help me as a site coordinator for the the TCE, taking care of tax professionals for VITA TCE program. I was a site coordinator in Montana. I had paid a banker to do some tax stuff. He knew everything but banking, caused me to get a frivolous, and that's where these issues started with me with the IRS. I'm just now coming through the clearance. I was indicted on some charges, but I knew it's been over a year and a half. My attorney talked to me yesterday. He says, man, they're about ready to dismiss this because you're not what we thought we were. We found the guy who messed up on your banking and your taxes, and it's been a year and a half. And I'm more of an innovator, a breakthrough person. I think I'm one of the best tax professionals and bankers on the planet, especially private. And I've got the CIA, the FBI, and the IRS checking my work. And it could be a lot of pressure, especially if you are out doing, criminal crimes. But I wasn't. I'm innovating. And my tax guidelines and rules follow all of the IRS 26 CFR rules and guidelines for preparing taxes. I'm just more in depth, and I came up with new methods of how to prove income. Not that people don't know how, I just did it in a certain way where you can ask the whole industry. So I have tax programs and different things that were being checked out by the agencies before I'm kind of like, I'm gonna say the word, cut loose to do what I do in the industry. And so I'm really proud of that. You know, I didn't like the idea that, hey, I was indicted, but it just comes with the program until you can prove that who you say you are. And when you prove who you can say you are, you'll see things change. But I had some issues with my father. I have an inheritance that's coming from my business. It's really huge. It's taking care of the whole industry. I've worked for 26 years in Oregon. It started. It was in 2000. I really came off of the scale. My clients were the Secretary of State, Contractors Board, Hoffman, Drake, Deacon, all the large contractors. I was members of AGC, Associated General Contractors. Then the Daily Journal of Commerce wrote a huge article on me in 2000 of March on page 33, and part of it is all about the new agenda in clearinghouse for all construction data. I protect homeowners and the industry from construction fraud. So if you're a homeowner, you hire a contractor, just because he has a license with the CCB doesn't mean he's covered, those types of things. So I created an agency around that. Google, investment companies wanted to buy into the company. They just didn't know how to take the risk when you're dealing with construction. They say construction is a really risky business, but they like the way we put things together.
Your Honor, at this point, I don't want to interrupt Mr. Waleed's flow here. I'd just like to make a standing objection to any hearsay or speculation with respect to his testimony. I don't want to keep stating up, so I would just have that, ask the court to take that standing objection.
Thank you, Mr. Ralph. So, yeah, the court will not consider any hearsay or anything that doesn't comport with the evidence.
Okay.
Mr. Waleed.
Okay. Okay. So just giving the background, when I talk about my father, he was one of my board members, and he's the last living survivor of the Contractors Information Bureau Women in Construction, and as well as government agency compliance. So my father and I worked together. He worked with some of my clients before, and actually his friends that he made, he felt really good going to AGC conferences. He was never a part of that. He was just a little contractor that got invited to my Port of Portland stuff. So I just want to give the reference there, because I mentioned this in my pleadings as a relationship to people who don't know about my father, but we're really big on construction in my family. And so when we talk about millions of dollars, the investment money that I have and that I've purported into these claims were designed for investments into the construction industry on my behalf in order to forward the business. It's just that certain things changed, and my father didn't follow the agreements, and he sold property, or he got property taken from him. Now that I'm thinking about it, I believe that these properties were taken when my father was in his mental state of incapacity, his early stages of dementia. But as a man's ego, he wants to make it look like he's there. But my father would never sell any of his property, $1.2 million for $200,000. My dad's not in his right mind. And according to our agreement, he violated the agreement. That is the only reason I have to put a lawsuit in order to claim the assets that other people have in their property. So I want to get to the guardianship conservatorship. Now, when we talk about the court visitor or first getting notice, we never received notice from the fiduciaries. And my father, I like to put into evidence in a minute, there is a declaration of service that was done by a Kyle Berg, who is a Chelan County, but he was also registered here. He is a process server. And he went to the VA hospital within the 48 hours that he was supposed to be there. And he stated in his declaration that he went into a room that was not the room of my father's. Okay, he was not in that room. I verified it because I was there, and we asked the nurses, and I took pictures of the room that he was really in. but along with his statement, he alleges that the individual accepted the services with direct delivery. My father's hands were not in a place to even hold anything. He couldn't even touch the button for the emergency at that age. He's getting to the stage now where he can lift his hand and fold it out. But in April the 24th, when he was allegedly to have been served, this gentleman was not in the room that my father was in. We verified this, and of course, when we move to the next level, we'll be asking for, it's federal, so they keep records a lot longer, who was where and who did what. So I want to submit this as evidence because this is the key to my father being served. If he was not served, and this stands up, this petition, according to the Supreme Court and the appellate court, should be dismissed because my father was not given the opportunity, nor was his attorney, Mr. Doyle.
I was trying to pause. You said you wanted to introduce that.
Yes, can I please?
Can you show that to the parties?
Yes, I will.
No objection.
Ms. Wilkes?
No objection, Sean.
Okay, so thank you without objection that O.W. and this is N as in Nancy? Oh, N as in Michael. We'll mark this. Thank you, Ms. Willie. Go ahead.
At that same time, Mr. Doyle came into the court in front of the Honorable Judge Henry. I believe he came in on the first, well, I missed the first, no, I was there for the first hearing. I missed the July 29th. Anyway, he came in the courtroom, and I wasn't here. I was on the telephone, and I could hear the questions. He came in with Selena and with Mr. Wisdom, and he came in basically stating that he represented my father and the power of attorneys who were, to me, alleged to abuse my father. And I'm on the phone, and I believe Salisbury, she was on it. She chewed, bricked him one so quick, I mean in a positive way, that, hey, man, who you representing? You gonna represent Mr. Martin, or are you representing the power of attorneys? And she was on it, and thanks to her for her just being on it, it moved Mr. Doyle pretty much out the way. He came to another hearing before the court, and Judge Henry really wasn't having it that day, because he was like, hey, have you made up your mind? This is really simple. Either you represent conflict of interest, or you're working with Selena, Mrs. Wilkes, and with Mr. Wisdom. And of course, he said the same old party line, oh, I'm representing them both. And the judge said, hey, I'm going to be calling the board. We got someone you to talk to. And it's all on the recordings. I mean, it was a victory right there to pretty much get rid of Mr. Doyle, because he never ever made it up to the hospital to see my father. And if he was the counsel for my father at that time, he missed the most valuable point, which would have been there to either waive or accept notice of that petition. And I believe my father was left alone. He was never served, and everyone just played it like it was playing the rule, like it happened. Fortunately, I did the research. I never got these documents into Montana, and when stuff would come, a few things came, it was 5 days late. And it does take 5 days regular mail to get something to Montana. I figured that out when I even sent overnight stuff here. So I always send mail if I'm going to send it overnight with a return receipt, so I get something. But I've had documents that I've sent to the Salisbury Willamette law, and I haven't gotten the return receipt from the overnight that it got received. It's record being it got there late, and when you send something overnight, it gets there late. You get to get the money back because it's supposed to be there within the the overnight, so you get the refund back. But I'm still looking for the return receipt. The post office claimed that it's coming, but there just always seems to be a problem about service when you're dealing with Willamette Northwest, and even Nina. The one who does some of the documents claims it. She swears that she put them in an envelope, and they use the pitney bow. So, in the next round, we definitely try to subpoena that. But we just feel that the Willamette Northwest Law Group and the conservators, that's the attorney, if they're doing it, they weren't responsible. There was never a personal service. They alleged to my father, but they never tried to reach me or my other 5 or 6 brothers. They only talked to Don, and then later to Alzina. And Don has been in cahoots with doing things against my father. I have it. I can't bring it up in court because it's evidence. But she's done things to my father that she testified that was not. One, she testified she was at the June event. Her picture's not on there. She wasn't there. Alzina, big sis, came and verified it because Don wasn't really into the Martin side of the family. She could care less about my father. Other than having him for the time that she had, she got access to certain bank accounts, took what she wanted, and then she set up everything with Luca and went through them while he was doing the remodel. So, and time will tell all that, but I'm concerned about this guardianship conservatorship. We have received documents after doing research from Christian Hale, who did the research, and not only did Oregon Advocates LLC bluff the courts with the petition for an emergency, they were out of business. Who goes in front of a court with an illegitimate license, and not just here? It was done all that year. They got petitions from January, February, March, April from different courts, and they were out of business. And you can't go around doing that. I mean, that's just, to me, unfair, and it's just unethical, and it's being fraudulent misrepresentation, not just to the courts, but to my family. We believe them to be a legitimate business, which means if you're up on your business responsibilities, you won't let 8 months lapse on an annual report and then expect us to be concerned about you managing our family's affairs on $10 million estate, and you're not even up to date on what you do. So to me, the petition should have been kicked out just based on that particular issue. And then yet alone serving of my father? You were supposed to serve my father and prove that. No one took a picture. Hey, here he is. No one took any other statement like 2 people went. Let's verify each other's story. It was none of that. And then as we look at the history of the service that's coming from Oregon Advocates LLC for the whole time for 6 months. They left my father sitting in the hospital when they had the power to do what they did just last 2 sessions ago, was to get him into a place and take care of my father. He was the longest person sitting in that hospital, and when we went to see him, before he was removed, his room for the whole week was never swept. His bathrooms and toilets were filthy. Of course, when I was there, we called for it. I was like, it's been 5 days I've been here, and I'm seeing still the same patches of foots on the floor. Went into the bathroom, and we had to come out of the bathroom because they never cleaned his urinal. And the issue was, my father couldn't even get up to use his own urinal. So this was the situation he was left in at the VA hospital. So we're thankful that my father is in a better place. He's looking good, but that could have been done within months. And the issue that behind all of this and why we had any objections to begin with, my objections weren't against Wilkes or against Wisdom. I didn't know anything that they might have done other than what I reported from what my sisters told me. Okay, now that I'm looking into it, I've got questions now about, hey, is this some made up stuff? Because they were the only ones that, to me, that were attacked, which pushed them out the way and allowed the third party, Oregon Advocates LLC, to come in and seize everything without due process. There was a process already state. Whether you're ignorant of the law is no excuse, but we have agreements already in place. I was at least the one to report this. I still should have received a phone call from Oregon Advocates LLC. We asked for a mediation. They asked the court on a 2-day notice to object to that mediation. We'd have saved this court how much valuable time? It's 6 months later. Meanwhile, my father sat in the hospital all the whole time, suffering. And if this is the type of relationship, is to sneak past and bluff the court that they're legitimate businesses, bluff them that they've given us proper service, bluff the courts and bluff the family, and then get people to jump on board. Now, I didn't really know Nathan, Mr. Rudolph, until we got into it, noticing that in July the 29th, that some of it's up on appeals, but to be a contested attorney for my father, he knows the rules. that you cannot go in front of a court ex parte and then not tell the other party, the opposition, that, hey, we're going. Hey, you got 24 hours. It takes me 10 hours to get from here, from Montana to here. I could be here the next morning if I'm given notice in 24 hours to be a part of that. If not, I found that it was done, some of it for some people was done over the phone. But we were never noticed. This is the type of what the fiduciaries were doing through the whole process. And this is what I'm able to prove on another jurisdiction, that this stuff was unreal and it's unfair to us. I mean, I would have been glad. Now listen, I live in Montana. So when they petitioned, there was a part of me that was, hey, my dad, whoa, now we can get to business. But it wasn't that. They bypassed me and my father's 14th Amendment rights. Oregon doesn't even have in their constitution anything about due process. So you have to rely on the 14th Amendment here. And because I'm from another state, I have a different jurisdiction with the federal courts. So that was my only action, because this here was not the tell-all, see-all. But you don't know that when you come. You know, you're excited, you're trying to get information in, so we apologize if we wasted any of the court's time, but we had months before this to negotiate this privately, and no one wanted to sit down. They refused mediation. Oh, we don't need to mediate. He's just trying to get his money. I'm trying to state for the record that we have an agreement. And I'm more concerned about my father's health as the agreement, because that's how I was designed to take care of him. So a conflict of interest, it might be noted because of the interference. Had they processed and called, or anyone said, Rasta, can we talk with you? I would have dropped the complaint against my father easily and moved into position to gain control of the assets, which I'm entitled to by our agreement for 33 years. And then we could have, let's take care of my dad. I even talked with Mrs. Fuller and Miss Fosback. They, when we last left here, it was a need that my father needed some clothes. So I went and spent like $400 or $500 on some clothes for my father. You know, like I'm on a budget here too. You know, I've got things I'm doing, but hey, my dad needs something. Hey, my dad always took care of me. He never second guessed of any of his children. We were fed. He paid his child supports. It was alleged that he didn't. He paid all and more. My dad kept giving and giving and giving. And when finally he needed something, my sisters couldn't show up. They sold the house on 8, got a $200,000 mortgage, and couldn't even spend $50,000 to make sure my father is where he is now. That's when my attitude changed with my sisters. I was like, oh, y'all just for y'all. So right away, Dawn, and I can see the positive benefits. There is a report out by Christian Hale on the different conservatorships that Mrs. Fuller's been kicked off on, because when in her petition she doesn't write out, hey, I had a problem in 216. She touches on it, but she doesn't say what it is. And to me, she'd have more power saying, hey, I made some mistakes. And so as I go forward with y'all, I'm going to tell you the mistakes I made. So that way, by sharing with you, disclosing with you certain information, it not always is looked, you'll miss some of them, but the ones that are right for you, you'll get the people that you want by telling the truth. You don't have to disclose you had problems. This industry is full of problems. It's to me, when you have solutions for those problems, it moves forward. And so I seen the concealment in there. I went and checked the research myself. I'm the one that gathered the reports. I subpoenaed Mr. Christian Hale. He wrote a declaration from the Department of Justice, so that way he really couldn't be here. That's what he was saying. I said, well, man, you got to give us a declaration, something. And they offered that. So I submitted that into evidence too. And it just goes through the list of different guardianship opportunities that Oregon advocates, it was specifically about Fuller. Fosback didn't have any, but talking with her, I see that she will say that she was somewhere and she wasn't. Okay, I'm not going to say we got proof, but we have an inkling that she wasn't there on the 23rd, which she says she was. Because when you asked her first up, I don't know where I was. I have to check my book. Where you're under subpoena, you should have that information. So I feel that if they were able to discuss this with us, and not now, we're to the point you soured it out, you made false allegations talking about I went to the hospital and tried the Contractors Bureau. This was pleaded into by Salisbury, that the Contractors Information Bureau, my technology company, that someone showed up to enter the premises of the hospital and tried to get in, and we were denied. Doesn't mention a date, a time, and nobody from the agency lives in Oregon. Okay? But that's the kind of, when they don't get their way, they'll throw in, rocks and different things in the pathway of righteousness to try to slow you up and make you go, oh, why did they say this about me? It was horrible. And then I would take my dad and get him dressed and then put him in a wheelchair and roll him around the hospital without anybody's consent. That was not true. The nurse seen me and my daughter show up. My daughter fed my father. I took pictures of all this. And she says, and I bought my father $400 worth of clothes of silk. Every time I see my dad, he looks like he's not being taken care of. Hair not shaved, not combed, not cut, and then his clothes. But I understand he's in a hospital position where he can't use the restroom on his own, so he doesn't get to wear boxers. I understand it. But I bought him $400 worth of clothes then, socks, shoes, blankets, everything, and I bought them down on May the 2nd. And I took pictures of everything. And after we fed my father that day, it came a few days, it was on a Sunday, so it was the 5th. It would have been May the 5th. We had fed my father, and the nurse, her name was, she's from Africa, really nice lady, but I think she's the head nurse. She says, I'll love to give, let you put your father in some of these clothes, and he'll feel good. The whole hospital's feeling good that you two showed up. You're the only two that have shown up for your father. Your dad is like bubbling because he started talking at his regular voice. Like, he shocked us. Hey, how you two doing today? And we turned around quick, looked at my father like, me and my daughter, like, you heard Grandpa say that? Yeah. And then we turned around and he said, well, I'm just glad to see you two. Thank you so much for coming. And we were just like, wow, Dad ain't all the way out of it. Y'all got this messed up. Yeah, he's incapacitated, but he does speak. If he wants to talk to you, he will talk to you, which is a sign to me he needs to be around his family. I planned this with my father. I've had all these years thinking about how I was going to take care of him, and then to be hurt. That from 2019 all the way to now, when you call a report and to tell what's happening with him, and then everyone's blocking you from doing what you do with your dad. Oh, it's conflict of interest because you're here about the money. Well, what else is there to talk about? I can't pay for anything unless the properties are already in my name. Gregory John Martin, I'm just not junior. It's not senior on there. He did that for a reason. But I became roster K-Wall lead, same social security number, because of my family of our African contribution to world history and my Native American, the real Native American stuff here. So I'm just, when it came to this petition, I just seen so many inconsistencies and to bully their way through by bluffing the court with the license, bluffing us with service, bluffing us that you're going to get this, not sending other kids information, and then telling us, and then having the July 29th hearing where you didn't even contact us, and it's on record, which puts a mark on the judicial responsibility of the judge. I mean, I don't even know this lady, but they did state in there, well, I wasn't there. They mentioned my name. They asked for professional advice. How do we take care of him? Like I'm this nuisance. When I'm really the only one, the stand guard, I'm the standing guard for my father. I care more about him than anybody in this hearing. I'm willing to go all the way till we get justice. And all I want is my father to have peace of mind. He's in his last stages. I'm not have to make up nothing. I need the assets were already mine. They're already on the table. The agreement is set in effect. And then these UCC, I gave everyone notice. I had an affidavit of notary, affidavit of indebtedness presented, a demand letter. I sent them to Luca, to Mrs. Wilkes, to Don, to anyone that had anything to do with the property. I sent all of them this notice, gave them time to respond. It was in November before I contacted the Adult Protective Services. So I was always, and know that when you're stating a claim upon which relief needs to be granted, it's not what you come to court to sue someone on, it's what you did before you got here. Did you give them notice? Did you let them know? My father, if anyone touched a piece of that property, it was worth so much. So the $33 million UCC was a blanket lien. I didn't go after anybody, bank accounts or anything there. It was just to set things forth that, hey, I have a security interest in this property and all my dad's property, and I'm here to claim it. And if we can have a discussion about this, no one responded. I called them, I left numbers, I texted them, I emailed those who I could email, and no one responded. So that's where that $133 million come from. It ain't just a number made up. Okay, that come from 11 different people that I sent notice to, including my father, because I knew our property was in someone else's hands. How they got it, I didn't know until I did more further research. And so things came up over time. But this GC, guardianship and conservatorship, was submitted to the court under fraudulent misrepresentation. They have not done the highest level of consistency of reporting, and they didn't do the highest level of anything with my father as far as his medical things are concerned. He sat for 6 months. He wore out the time. And he finally got moved after our third court hearing to where he was supposed to go. And where he's at, my dad needs some TLC, some tender loving care. He has a certain amount of benefits that comes from the VA, and as being a family member, we don't get to tap into those benefits. Only the fiduciaries do. So they're using his money that should be for him to pay for their salaries when he's getting less. That's my father's stuff. He earned that going to the war and being a citizen and paying his taxes too. So all of this conflict of interest only came up when Willamette Northwest and when Oregon Advocates LLC, as well as Adult Protective Services, didn't comply with the due process laws that we're entitled to as American citizens. That was what hurts, that no one respected it enough. She didn't report it to the ethics committee. Hey, we got a durable power of attorney that this guy just now got, he's incapacitated. Greg Jr. steps up. They were more so worried about the alleged threats of Wilkes and Wisdom that they directly went after them. And that's understandable, because my view, I'm like, I don't know what they did. They rounded them up. Thank you. Now I can go to business. I know what the rules were. I'm waiting to jump in the game. So when I jump in, we're not going to tell you. There's a third party here petitioning on your behalf on your birthday. Whoa, I knew that was spiritual right there for me. That was like a on high in heaven thing, like, hey, you get to litigate with this. So that was very disrespectful. And then the court visitor, she came in and made some statements and said her first report was, it was all good, it was all gravy. And then she did another report basically saying that Mrs. Fuller was problematic. Then she got on the stand and changed that story up. And then she never contacted the people she was contacting. You heard Alzina, my oldest sister. We asked her, and it's in the report that I spoke with Alzina, and she didn't speak with Don. She said she spoke with Alzina. This is the court visitor. I'm actually saying visitor right this time. You have noticed that, okay? Catherine Garman, she stated in her report that, hey, it was accurate. She spoke with my sister Alzina, and you heard Alzina say, I was not with anything. She never contacted me, but she wrote it in the report. And what I'm trying to state for the records is, a lot of this stuff happens. I wonder about other families who might not have someone like me, who has a vested interest in my father's outcome. Not just his physical, his mental, his physical, the whole thing, because we've worked together. I know what my dad is suffering. I've been here, I've been on his healing side before when he had I'm gonna call it drug abuse, but it's what it was. I had to nurture him through that and then get him to trust me because he was hiding. He's flipping out, going through stuff. Dad, you want to do some counseling? He took some counseling, became a part of a few of the VA groups, and after at least 1.5 years, I seen him start to pick himself up. And then we were able to get back to work again. And then shortly after that, I had to leave, going to Montana. He's the one that told me, Oregon, son, is too big, too small for you and me. I couldn't figure it out, but I was already being established in Montana. My Uncle Nathan and Uncle Ed had friends there. My dad has a few associates he knows there who work for him here. They talk about Montana. My dad loves bragging about me. My boy's up there, and then some of them know me. You, Amar's son? And so I had a few gifts for taking to my mother and my father from some friends there who went to Portland, and he was just tickled that his boy lived in Montana. So these stories about my father and his rudeness when he's alone, he doesn't want people in his business, he would never, until now, if he could speak, really talk about those agreements that we had. Because I think my father felt in these days of his incapacitation, I think he felt like a failure. And I didn't think about it till another old man told me. He says, man, your dad's just suffering because he didn't get to do all the stuff that he wanted to do.
Your Honor, at this point, I'm just going to renew my standing objection and speculation.
It's not. I'm just telling the story.
I'm not interested in standing up and objecting every time that comes up, but I just want to renew that.
Okay.
So the court, it's a
I'll stay on.
trial. The court's only going to consider evidence that
Okay.
conflicts with the evidence.
Okay.
So,
Well, I'd like to bring up some evidence. On the July 29th hearing, when we weren't there, the judge had asked, or Mrs. Bungie had asked for any examples of what they could do to slow me down. That's what they were really talking about. It's all on tape. I've got it. We weren't there. But also, this is a contested hearing, and Mr. Rudolph knows that he was hired for a contested hearing. He knows that not only...
At this point, I'm going to object to any speculation about what I know or don't know without
He told me in the hallway.
Foundation.
Okay.
I'm just stating that.
Okay, you're right. Okay, let me say that. As an attorney, there are rules for contested hearings. I was told by him personally that he was hired by the court to facilitate this contested proceeding, which is a protective proceeding. So it's contested. So to have a court hearing out of fairness, even being my father's representative, he has objected more times to things to me that my father, it would have been relevant. It's obvious he doesn't know my father or my father's interests, because my father's interests, he would want to hear what Wisdom and what Wilkes had to say. Because now that I'm looking at the documents and knowing my father asked him to do things as friends. He signed them up as power of attorneys. He did this stuff to protect his own interests the way he know how. That was it. Would you be my power of attorney? He didn't ask, because there's no legitimate signatures for what we're doing. All we've got are allegations about some stuff in a bank statement, and then we have this so-called notice of substantiated abuse that has not been picked up, but the other side gets to bring it up like it's law, and I haven't heard anything. I'm supposed to get something according to the rules. So I'm just saying, Mr. Rudolph, I think he's a gentleman. I really do. And I thank him for at least being available to get Mr. Rudolph out the way. But he has made no significant difference since. Nothing for my father's interest. Okay, go sees him when he wants to see him. There's no special care. Maybe you can't do every client like that. And I can't speak about the man's integrity. I've checked his record. I mean, I didn't find anything with the board, but I'm concerned with my father that he wouldn't be making certain allegations or saying certain things or objecting to certain things that are relative to a contested hearing. And in that hearing in front of Judge Arlecon, my father's attorney, who was hired to protect my father's interests, even if my father disagrees, one thing my father has always taught me is listen to the other person's side of the story, son, before you hire them and before you fire them. Because they might tell you something that might make you reconsider your disposition about them. My father he would at least hear you out. He'll cuss me out after sometimes. Are you still on that? Da-da-da-da-da. You silly, son. He'll say what he say, but he would at least hear you out. And that's how my father was. He was well spoken. So he didn't get by in life bullying his way, and like some people say he was. He ain't made his own rules. He had to follow the same rules all of us had to too. He just had his unique way of having a lot of confidence in himself. But as we could see, the confidence didn't add up to his financials. He didn't feel that confident about himself. He gave this property away, or it was taken from him, forged from him. So I just want to say that my father did the best that he could do with what he had to work with, what he believed. But as far as a son, he didn't fail me. He made the biggest thing with me when he made those agreements, and it was up to me to stand up to the obligation, because if I didn't, my father and everyone else could say, you didn't complete your stuff, so you have no right. Where's your hours? 51,500. Okay, you did your part. Notarized, verified, invoices verified, ledgers verified. I'm looking for the ledgers now, and that's where I'm at. So I need to know some things, and I don't have access to medical records like everyone else does. Like he's got certain benefits with the VA that I should be a part of his medical record. At least I will petition the court at another time that I should be able to see the medical records, because I'm the one who can find out where the assets went, where the property went, where's the stuff Mr. Gorman was talking about. Where did you take my father's stuff? He said scapoose, but then after that, when he asked the question, I was objected. I might have asked a lot of questions, and I've objected to a lot of things, because I know for appeals purposes, if something was stated and I didn't object to it, and I had a chance to, appeals will bypass that. But if I've objected and it was statutory, the trial court makes errors, then sometimes the trial court is right on the money. So I feel real confident with all of this proceeding. And then time to take the stand in the end of it to express and to show what we had to do. Why did we sue everyone else in federal court for damages? It's because of what we've seen, what has happened in front of us, and no respect, a lot of disrespect for the court, as if the court is an occult science court who operates and vibrates on a higher frequency. I think they're going to be fooled this time. They might have gotten what they wanted, as they mentioned, when you left the bench and Miss Ramsey came to say goodbye to us one day. They all heard about Mr. Judge Henry being taken out of the probate court, and all we heard was, oh my God, what are we going to do? Henry gave us everything. And I said, maybe he's under federal investigation. And they looked at me like, how could you say that? Because I'm out in the public. I work with the federal government on many different levels, and they're looking in anything that I'm into, because I'm high frequency. There's usually something I'm up against. And to be a challenge to come here today, I'm not an attorney, but I love my father. I respect my father. He made me stand to those agreements. And that was his word. And so in the end, he loses his mind and he doesn't honor his own objection. My father would love me for standing up and believing in what it was that we agreed to do, and not taking any objections or anything less about conflicts of interest. It's a conflict of interest when you interfere with me and my father's business by not notifying me that he was incapacitated professionally, objectionably, and that was by nobody. They made it look like I was the nuisance. And the judge in the July 29th hearing, Alicorn, she gave them legal advice, but she wasn't supposed to do. It's on the recording. I have submitted it to evidence, and what to do to me to silence me. And I didn't like what was said. And I haven't taken it any step further because, I have tough skin. I'm not really after Judge Alicorn. I'm more into the fact when you represent yourself as really good attorneys, sometimes a judge can see that. Say, hey, they're always on the money. Hey, I'm going to give them this ruling. I'm going to honor that. And I think they've been bluffing the court and getting stuff from the judges that if the judges had known they didn't live up to their obligations, like on July 29th, the Judge Alicorn wrote an order, says within 2 days, you notify the opposing party. There has never been any notification. And I even asked on the emails, because I live in Montana. I'm like, it take 5 days to get anything. Your records department and the probate department, Gary, and all of the records people know me more than a lot of people, because I call and request and pay for data and information repeatedly to make sure I didn't miss anything. Because there was a lot of things that was missed in the beginning when the judge allowed them to have a 2-day notice to serve my father and to notify us. They didn't respect that. And through the whole proceeding, Oregon Advocates Legal Counsel has been running the same, as we call it, jig on the courts, as if the court is not conscious enough to figure it out. And I think that we presented enough evidence before the court to show you that there was a lack of concern for my father. Things were not done in the best interest of my father. A group of power of attorneys, whether they were right or wrong, have pretty much hit all of the burden, and there's things stated about them that there's no NOSA report to even verify. How does the other party to know all this information other than what they were told? They haven't even had a substantiated report, and neither can, oh, by the way, for the records, the Adult Protective Services was served a subpoena to appear for the October the 1st hearing. She did not appear. We're talking about Megan Huffman. She was served by personal service, and she did not appear, and she was also given a customary, not by me, because you know I can't do any of that, by the process service, heart to heart. She did not show up to the October 1st hearing. And then there's an address that is in the petition for Megan Adult Protective Services. She gives an address. That address has been deleted or vacant. When the process service went there, the owner of the building said the Adult Protective Services has not been in this building for over a year and a half. So the information that she's leaving for you to contact her, she doesn't answer emails anymore, even from me. And she gave an address that she was at a particular location. She wasn't. She was served a federal summons yesterday at her office out on 122nd and Gleason. But we just let you know, she put out there, this is how you notify her. And the petitioners claimed they were in contact with her, and she was not at that address that they gave everyone else to rely on. So we're just saying it for the record. We've been doing the research so we could contact the people and make sure that our petitions were heard. As you could hear from Luca, you could hear from Mrs. Liberty Northwest. They've been receiving mail. They've been getting it. They just don't respond. Ms. Wilkes received mail. They all received mail from me. This has been a 2.5-year process. I was at least writing people, asking questions about my father. No one responded. So I finally called Adult Protective Services thinking that I had an ear or someone to hear it, and I've been getting the runaround. And to make matters worse, the court visitor didn't do her job, and I paid, I petitioned, unbeknown to me, for a PR, thinking that my father was incapacitated. I didn't know he had to be deceased to be his personal representative, but I paid $800 like they did for the petition. I was ready to pay the $500 to the court visitor because she was summoned to me. I was given a, hey, pay Mrs. Court visitor, pay Miss Garment. And I had said, oh, I read about her. I read a report. She was biased. Why I want to pay her? So that's where the motion to ask for a new court visitor came. It was after I was sent. You got to pay her. She's the one. She's willing. I said, well, hold it. I don't think I want her because I read her report. She was biased. She said she called my sister. My sister said she never called her, but she said she did in the report. She verified certain things, and then we got Thomas, who was the protective. He's actually my father's disability rights of Oregon. He wrote a letter to the court, and in that letter, he said that Mrs. Fuller and Mrs. Garman, the court visitor, reports are inaccurate. And then he sent a letter to the courts, to Judge Henry, stating the records, and then he also sent a letter to the legal counsel asking them to square up the business and to put the right things in the report. He said he never heard back from Salisbury, and you don't hear back from her. I did ask Mrs. Salisbury if we could correspond through email. It just would have been simple. That way, when she filed something, I could get it. And because I paid the other $200 fee to be an objector, I was entitled by law to any of the filings that came. We never received them. So I had to go pay extra from the records department to get the file, then the whole file, and then I went through those and noticed all of these different servings, that my father wasn't served, this person wasn't at the hospital, all the key things to make void this petition. So now as we move forward, I think I've said what I said, that I substantiate what I could, but there's some things that just didn't go right, and there's some things that just don't go right. That's why you have a trial, and especially a trial with no jury in front of a judge who can whip through the BS or the CS and figure out what's right and what's in the best interest of the protected person. Like I stated, I want to be with my father. He needs to be with me. This is the last days of his life. And I've watched people who have not worked with my dad for 33 years. He's ornery sometimes, he's whatever it is, but right now, he just deserves some peace. The man's done enough. I know how to recover the assets. I don't have to sue my father. I know all the people they came. I know how to do this. Okay? I just want my father to be with me. And no one will work and be in the best interest of my father. And he has bills to pay, I can help make sure those bills get paid. We don't need a third party draining his as a fiduciary, draining his things. Okay, we just don't. It's just not fair to him. It's his benefits. He earned those. He fought in the war. He was a good citizen. And so half of his Veteran Affairs benefits are going towards their fiduciary expenses and fees. And they have a history of being places that they say they weren't in this report from Christian Help. That they've done things that they claimed and, they haven't. Now that we're here, hey, looks can be deceiving, but I do know and I do believe that now that a lot of this has gotten a lot of attention, but we got a lot of bad soil. We don't need to plant any more flowers in this soil till we weed them out. They didn't deserve to be here. They didn't give us a chance to hear anything. They objected a lot of things. Every petition that we filed, objection. And now that we're here, I think we've been heard by the court. And so I like to say there is a pledge agreement, which my father typed up, put the assets in there, had me sign it, had my uncle sign it when everything was done. We signed a promissory note for $7.5 million. My sisters don't know my father, especially in his early years. My dad was a sharp wit. Sharp. Over time, things slow down. So he's not as whipper sharp. He thought he had to take on the world by himself. And he always had a valued son that he valued. My sisters would hear the sides they wanted to hear. But they had to tell a little truth. Yeah, you were with Dad. I worked with my dad the whole time. I've never left him. And I'm still right here, right now, defending him against a third party who has been deceiving to the courts, and have never stated for the records until I brought it to the court's attention of some of these issues. They never came out on their own and said, we was wrong. And everyone makes mistakes. I do it all the time. I just try to learn from them. And if I can correct them and listen to some good advice, I move forward on that. No other questions, or anybody got any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Willie. Ms. Wilkes, do you have any questions for Mr. Willie?
No, Your Honor. Being Mr. Martin's friend for 50+ years.
So this is just a time for you to ask some questions. You'll be able to give a closing statement at the end of the case.
Okay.
But do you have any questions for Mr. Willie?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Rudolph, do you have any questions for Mr. Willie?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor.
So we can let's just talk about where's the best spot. So Mr. Lee, I know this has been an incredibly tough afternoon for you. It gets a little weird with cross-examination. People want to show you things
you're
you're
right.
talking over.
I
So
don't mind sitting over there.
are you okay sitting
I'm
up
perfect
here?
with that.
Okay. All right. Go ahead and pour yourself some water up there. Of course, you're still under oath, but sometimes it's just a little easier to show documents back and forth and that kind of thing. It helps me understand better too. Okay. All right, Mr. Rudolph, go ahead.
Okay. Mr. Willie, you have filed a lawsuit in federal court naming, I believe, 35 different defendants, correct?
Yes, sir.
Including your father.
Yes, for breach of contract.
Okay. You've also named Ms. Wilkes as a defendant.
Tortious interference, yes.
And Earl Wisdom.
Tortious interference.
and Megan Huffman with DHS.
Yes, tortious interference, violation of my 14th Amendment constitutional rights, of right of due process. I had a right to be contacted, since I'm the one that made the report, to let me know the status of my father.
And the city of Portland.
Yes, they were stealing property from my father. They stole building materials. We had several of the building inspectors over a period of time go in there and take my father's materials. They would take while I was talking with Mr. Huffman, they would take the vehicles that were outside of his house on the beach. They would go and flatten the tires of my father's stuff. They were caught on video from the neighbor. He'd see the city get out, flatten the tires, come back the next morning and tow all his cars. And then write violations on the property for nuisances. It was a game for them, and they have a history of doing it in the black community.
And you also named me and my law firm as defendants.
Yes, you represented my father. You got on the case. You had a hearing on July the 29th in front of the court on a contested hearing, and you didn't even mention, hey, where's the other party? You went forward with your destruction of us, and you were in part, you didn't object to the court when Mrs. Bungie says, well, what do we do about him? We're having all this problem. It usually takes us a minute at a time. Any suggestions, Your Honor? There was no objection from you saying, hey, this is wrong. He's not even here to defend himself. You didn't.
And so the claim against me is for what?
Tortious interference with an existing contract.
What are the elements of that?
You know what? They're already pleaded. If you want to go get the complaint, we can do that, but I don't think the court wants this time. We can deal with that in federal court. It's the real issue. You interfered. You had a chance to set the record straight.
My question for you, Mr. O'Leader, is what are the elements of the claim of tortious interference?
Tortious interference is, I have an existing contract. You knew about it. I sent you a copy of those contracts in the mail, first class.
I'm going to object any testimony about what I knew.
Okay, Your Honor. I sent those. I sent them a copy.
It's the same. I'm just going to have everybody pause.
Okay. Okay.
Because it was very emotional testimony for you, Mr. Lee. This is going to be a very emotional part of the case. Okay. And it's better for me to absorb the information. If I know it's not easy to take the emotion out of it, it's gonna be there. But if we start having people yelling at each other, it distracts me from being able to really absorb the information. Okay,
I can take.
We're only gonna go about another 10 minutes,
okay,
and then we're gonna be here another day.
Okay.
Okay. So, Mr. Rudolph, go ahead.
And Mr. Rowley, I don't have a lot of questions for you. Okay, and I'm not trying to make this more difficult than it needs to be. Okay. What is the statute of limitations on a breach of contract?
It could be depending on which state.
I'm talking about the state of Oregon where you filed the breach of contract claim against your father.
The breach of contract claim really would have been established, could have been in 2019, as well as the breach of contract he was actually helped to breach the contract.
I'm sorry, I don't think my question was clear. I'm not asking you about the specific case. I'm asking you what is the statute of limitations on a breach of contract.
If you got a moment, I have a federal and an Oregon claims book. I can look that up.
I'm not asking you to.
Well, then I don't have that answer for you if I can't get to my bag.
Okay. What's the statute of limitations on an account stated claim?
I got to go look in my bag right there. I have all those answers to you.
Okay. Let me rephrase. Do you know, without looking it up, what the statute of limitations is on a wage claim in Oregon?
I don't think there's a wage claim. The account stated has nothing to do with the wage claim. Those are two different elements of the law.
What specifically are you asking the court to order at the end of this hearing?
At the end of this hearing, since we haven't had we've had the power of attorneys for Wilkes and the power of attorneys, maybe I haven't even heard Mr. Wisdom pretty much say, hey, we're really not positioned. We didn't know that there was something existing prior to all this. So we haven't heard, even with their fraudulent misrepresentation to the court, we haven't heard anything from Oregon Advocates LLC about rescinding or terminating their petition. And by law, since you didn't serve my father and you didn't do certain things, this should be terminated. So I'm asking the court to terminate their guardianship because it's unrighteous.
Okay, so and again, I'm not asking you to get into the specifics of your argument. I'm just wanting to understand what you're going to be asking of the court. So if I hear you correctly, you're going to be asking the court to not grant the guardianship, correct?
Correct.
Are you going to be asking the court to not grant the conservatorship?
Correct.
Are you going to be asking anything else from the court?
Yes, the conservatorship and the guardianship was presented to the court with fraudulent misrepresentation. It was not based on the accuracy of the disposition of the firm who petitioned, as well as the guardian and conservators. They lied about things in the petition that were not correct.
Okay, again, I'm not asking for the specific arguments. If the judge were to say, I'm denying the guardianship and the conservatorship, would you ask anything else from the court?
Yes. I would.
What else would you ask the judge to order here?
If that was going to be it, now we're in position, either they re-petition the court, my father's got some protection a little bit, and I would drop my claims against my father because it would be no basis for it. The basis is because he was not given the opportunity, you interfered with our personal agreements, so we filed the lawsuits to protect my father, our assets, and what we already have situated with our agreements.
Okay.
It's a protection thing.
All right, so if the court determines that a guardianship and a conservatorship is necessary, then you're going to continue with the lawsuit. Is that correct?
The lawsuit is only in effect because the process of petitioning this court for guardianship and conservatorship was done wrong. Now, if the court upholds that, that's telling you where the court's integrity is at. That's just a straight fact. There are rules and regulations how petitions and guardianships are supposed to be administered, and they broke the rules several times.
My question, I'll try to be clear. If the judge determines that a guardianship and conservatorship is necessary, are you going to continue with your lawsuit?
I don't know.
Okay.
But I will tell you this.
Hold on.
You asked me ask a question. You don't get to shut me off. Let me speak. You asked me. I'm saying, let me tell you this. Because it's a stat question that you asked me. If he does this, if he does that, had they took care of business in the first time, we wouldn't even been here for the judge to have to make this decision.
No, I understand, and you'll get a chance after I'm done asking questions, and if Mr. Salisbury asks questions, you'll get a chance to do your own.
I'm just trying to answer your
question.
Okay. I'm trying to answer your question because it's a stat question. Oh, were you trying to say this? You trying to say that? Specifically, there would be no lawsuit had they petitioned the court accurately and correctly. So you're asking me, if someone didn't cut me, would I not be wounded? I'm wounded because of their petition.
Do you believe your power of attorney is effective today?
When my father became incapacitated, it was effective. It's so effective that it prevented several people from contacting me to give me the evidence. My durable power of attorney says I only become irrevocable and active once he's incapacitated, once I have proof. I still don't have proof.
And under the power of attorney that you believe is effective, are you supposed to be managing your father's assets?
They were already my assets. You're trying to snatch my father up and then ask, he's got assets. These assets were already pledged 33 years ago. The work was already done, 51,500 hours. My dad did not finish his business.
What do you believe your duties are under the power of attorney document to your father?
Is to take care of my father. The difference, my power of attorney is different than anybody's power of attorney in here because it's vested with the security interest in the property and the assets. So it's different. It's not like your regular, I'll be his help today. It was designed so a person who pledged assets and property couldn't just go in the end of the day go, I'm crossing you out after you give me 33 years of service. It was not set up that way. It was set up where if once he became incapacitated, we had business already. He violated that. Had I known, I would have moved faster.
Mr. Wally, does the power of attorney give you authority to make financial decisions for your father?
I already have the authority under that power of attorney only when he becomes incapacitated to act in the best interest of him and me. It's stated there. It's like y'all haven't read this stuff? You lawyers. It should be simple. I've read this stuff and verified it all over the country.
Mr. Wally, do you believe it is a conflict of interest for you to be both plaintiff in a lawsuit and acting as power of attorney for your father, defending the same lawsuit?
I can't defend my father in a lawsuit. That's the most ridiculous thing you can say.
Okay,
Either
I have no further questions.
Okay. I think now is a natural place to stop for the day.
Thank you.
Mr. Lee, you can go back to your seat there. Thank you, sir. So, scheduling purposes, we will pick up with Ms. Salisbury's cross-examination of Mr. Lee next time. Mr. Lee, you'll have the ability to do what's called redirect, which is just basically you clarifying any of the answers that you gave during cross-examination if you want, okay?
Okay.
I understand you don't have any more witnesses, correct?
They didn't show up.
Okay. And so then, Ms. Salisbury, do you expect a rebuttal case?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, can you give me an idea of what you're thinking so far? How many witnesses?
1 to 2.
Okay. And then we're also going to take up Ms. Wilkes' motion because you wanted some more time to, like we talked about earlier. So, looking at some dates here, Monday, November 18th, I have all day. We start at 8:30 and go to 4:30.
November 18th?
Yes.
Thank you. What day is that on?
That's a Monday.
Okay.
Monday, November what?
Something's happening in November. Somebody's getting married. Okay. It's Monday. They won't get married on a Monday.
Ms. Salisbury, how does Monday the 18th look?
That date works for me, Your Honor.
Okay, Mr. Rudolph?
Works for me.
All right, Mr. Willie?
Yes, I'll make that work. I'll
All
be here
right.
from Montana.
Thank you. Ms. Wilkes?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, yeah, the next hearing date will be Monday, November 18th. We'll start at 8:30, go till noon. Then we'll go from 1:30 to 4:30, or as long as we need to finish up the case. With any luck, maybe we'll be able to finish it that day. We shall see. Do you think, Ms. Salisbury, because I have the next day, the entire day, do you think I should block that out? Just in case, because Mr. Waleed's in town, and then if everybody's here, because if I don't, then there's a good chance if we don't get done, we're looking at next year.
Okay, I
Yes,
think
Your Honor.
we need a day.
Okay, let's block off the 19th. Do the same thing all day, and we'll just kind of see how it goes. Okay? All right, the temporary order remains in effect, and anything from any party?
There you are.
All right. Thank you all. I know it's been a very tough day, very tough number of days, and I do appreciate the presentations, okay? With that, we'll go off the record. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor.
Thank you.